Welcome to the Easy Speak Speakeasy.
You've unlocked the door to unfiltered mental health and wellness conversations. Okay, here we are, episode 5.
Hi, Diana.
Hi, Kristi.
How are you?
I am so great.
We're unlocking these unfiltered conversations about mental health.
About mental health.
And wellness.
And it's still Women's Empowerment Month, so that's exciting. And what better month than to introduce our newest set member edition.
Yes, sorry for all those listening on the podcast because you can't see this slaying piece.
This slaying gorgeousness capture. Look at her. Look at her. The moment Kristi and I laid eyes on capture while we were shopping for this new set Hootist situation.
New set Hootist. Set upgrade. Let me upgrade ya.
Yes. We both let out such a huge gasp that I believe everyone within a 12-mile radius heard us.
Perf.
Yeah.
Also, I love when that happens.
I know. It was like...
It was like she was waiting for us.
She was just hanging on the shelf like this, like, I belong at the Easy Speak.
Correct.
I don't know why she has a New Orleans accent, but she does.
Well, you know, it's a little speakeasy. Because that's where we fell in love with speakeasies.
Oh, that's true.
That's why she's a little Narlands.
Yes.
That is not a New Orleans accent, what I just did, by the way.
It sounded like
that little Narlands. That is incorrect. Sorry to everybody I just offended. And for those who are listening, we should probably describe capture. How would you describe this sexy beast?
Oh my gosh.
She is the embodiment of this month, right?
Yes.
Like International Women's Month.
Yes.
Like power. She's bright red, glossy.
Yes.
Body
on point. She's got this power pose. I love her because I feel like she has like that like touch of like sensuality, but also like not in a vulgar way, like in a very like classy, strong.
She's powerful
woman.
She's like, I'm sensual and
sensual and
make sure you have consent.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, I love her. She's great.
Yes. So she's here to stay.
Yep.
And I'm down with that.
Yes. I love her. And then we also have today, we poured our drinks already in our RBG glasses. We have a strawberry situation happening. I wish I could remember what this is.
Your ASMR.
Yes. Wild strawberry sour mash liqueur with some ice and Pellegrino. And it's like really nice and refreshing. And it's pink. And we have our RBG glasses with us today. And I also just want to point out the slayage of our outfit choices. We do not talk ahead of time about our outfits, but like check out those shoes and check out my outfit. Check out her her t-shirt, and check out these glasses, RBG on them. I mean, it's just, and
we have the Notorious RBG.
The napkins.
On my shirt and on our glasses, and you're in black and brown dress, and I have the exact pattern heels on. It's just
color block heels, which
nobody would ever believe we didn't plan this.
I know, it's hilarious.
When you walked in, I was like, nobody will believe it.
This is what happens. There's like that synergy, like our brains are connected even when we're apart. I literally ran into my closet and I was like, this one and this one, and I like picked out my outfits, like not even thinking twice about it.
Yeah,
it's so funny.
I love this about us.
Yeah, me too.
So I think, speaking of the Notorious RBG, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, for those who don't know those initials. We, in wrapping up this month that is all about women and us being two women who are unafraid to use our voices and have unfiltered conversations, I think it was like a fun choice for us to have these little touches of RBG with us today, because she was such an important figure on the Supreme Court, and even before that, with everything that she did, and her ability to use her voice and not go with like what other people were saying and dissent against what was happening around her, and really fight for women and for important issues. And I feel like in many ways that's what we do in mental health and in some other spaces, but definitely for mental health and for families. And I think as just entrepreneurs who are trying to make a space in the world, and we have very different ways about us in a lot of ways. And I think that we like respect and uphold each other's opinions, even though they may not be the same. Like, we really respect each other and think about each other's opinions on things. And so that to me is so like RBG. You know, like she was, I feel like, so powerful, so thoughtful, and made such a difference in the lives of women. I mean,
it's amazing. I admittedly did not know that much about her. It was when she died, and I was working for a company at that time that, you know, the people who were working there were just really so distraught, and so we had like a reflection space about her. And so I started like learning about her history, all the different things that she did. And then of course she was really good friends with a news anchor on NPR whose name is not in my mind right now, but they had a few like specials about her. Where they talked, and, you know, this woman like interviewed her throughout the years, even before she became a Supreme Court justice. So they were like, had little sound clips of like different interviews they'd had over the years. And one of the biggest things that stood out for me about her was how powerful she was, but also how great of a unifier she was. So she was really good friends with, I think Justice Scalia, and the two of them, and in terms of their opinions, were very different, and they would almost always be opposite, voting on different things on the Supreme Court. But then like their families were extremely close. Like they'd like vote and then like go to dinner with one another. And so that really stood out to me, especially in this, there's just so much contention in the world right now, especially on from a political standpoint. You know, it's either you're on this side or you're not, and it feels like there's not a lot of people who are giving good examples of what it's like to disagree, but respectfully so, and disagree but still maintain a healthy relationship as colleagues and as humans, you know. And so I really loved learning that about her, and it really started to make me think more about, you know, who she was, and try to learn a little bit more about this incredible woman who, just like, to think about it, you know, when she became a part of the Supreme Court, it's like, that's like unheard of, you know. Now we have multiple women on the Supreme Court, we have people of color, like, you know, so she definitely broke down some doors, which is amazing.
And I have thought of her a lot recently with some of the changes that have happened in the world around like Roe versus Wade, and a lot of, because she was Jewish, there's been just so much recently sort of like hatred and hate speech around the Jewish community. And I've thought of her and what sort of her stance and poise would be, and what she would be saying in the world at this point. But it's interesting, you know, how somebody who had such an important space in the world is not there to hold that space, how important, you know, these roles are. But, you know, what you were saying about the importance of respecting other people's voices, I think is one of the core values that we have when it comes to parent voice and mental health. And that, to me, I think is something that we continuously are having to fight for you, for the people that you are serving, families that you work with, and for me, with the families that I work with, and also with families that I interface with in my personal life through, my son. And I think, over the years of time that I've been working in the field talking about parent voice, there are these sort of terrible misnomers about what family voice is about.
Yeah.
And they equate, I'm putting like a lot of people into the they category.
Yeah.
Like professionals, people in different places that are not families, that are working with families on behalf of families, or, quote unquote, in unison with families, oftentimes have a different perception of a family's voice than what they may even say to the family.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of times when parent voice isn't in a room, there is an entirely different type of conversation than what happens when the parents are in the room.
Right.
Which is why it's so important for families to be included at every level when it comes to their kids' mental health.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree. It's an interesting topic because, most medical things, if we think about just like the medical field, people are going to the experts, right? There's like, the expert is the surgeon who knows how to remove your gallbladder, right? You're not going to go there and tell the surgeon what to do with that, right? But mental health has so much everyday life nuance in it that the expert actually is the family or the caregivers, right? And it's a different perspective than what the field in general is used to, right? It's just another example of how, as a whole, our society is really approaching mental health from the wrong perspective, or putting too much energy in one particular direction, right? Like I said, I think a few episodes ago, that quote that mental health is a medical problem with social solutions, right? And that's very unique to mental health. That's not the same thing as, any other physical health aspect. And so I think a lot of people have a hard time wrapping their minds around looking to the family for the expertise, because we've just been so conditioned to, look to the experts, right? The people who have gone through years of training and all of that. And, there is a role for all of that. But the point is, and I think what we continuously try to communicate to people is that that can't be the standalone thing as it relates to mental health, right? That's why we're seeing the huge bottleneck in the mental health system, because we're relying so heavily on professionals. And it's like, I used to say to my families all the time when I worked with them, one-on-one therapy, I was going into people's homes in Boston, and I would say to them, hey, I'm here 1 hour a week. There's so many hours that I am not here. And so the time that I'm here should be to capitalize on what you're doing versus the other way around, right? And so let's figure out how to make that happen. But that's not a typical stance. And, I think part of the issue is that a lot of times people enter into their mental health care journey at a point of inflection, at a point of crisis, right? We tend to wait till it becomes a huge issue before we address it, right? It's only recently that we even started doing mental health screenings at well visits, right? And so we're not necessarily very proactive in this country and in our society as it relates to mental health. And so I think we get to a point where everything's kind of on fire, and we have a very set way of how we approach things. But we know that that's not sustainable, because our system is failing children and families left and right, right? They're the shortest wait list right now for therapy that I've heard is a month. And then when I hear that, I'm like, are you new? And it's usually they're a new provider, or they're not that great, so people don't necessarily want to go to them, right? And so, yeah, it's tough.
Yeah. The other thing that I love the comparison that you made to the medical model, because I feel like this is such a great point. When it comes to the medical model, families are always considered, right? So when we talk about, okay, the gallbladder situation, like if you're going to have your gallbladder out, nobody would just go ahead and make a decision to take a kid's gallbladder out without their parents' consent, right? In the mental health field, people take liberty with mental health services, with what they think a parent's or a family's thought process approach may be. And in actuality, they really have no idea, or they have made a lot of assumptions. And in the medical model, that's something that would never happen. And I think this is where we start to see contention start to happen between providers and parents, is this liberty that ends up happening, that has been taken from a family's life, right? Like you've made this decision, or you've made this formed this opinion about a family, and therefore you've made a recommendation or changed something in school, or done something that is different without consulting with and getting the permission of the family. And that is something that I think, because we don't maybe take mental wellness and mental health as seriously a lot of times as the physical aspects, that all of the things that fall after that are not taken into consideration, right? Like people share information about mental health so much more openly than you would ever share somebody's medical information. Like these conversations that happen, or
between like a teacher and elaborate. So like people will voice, I've heard on a number of occasions, I've been in rooms where we're having a conversation about a family or a youth, and suddenly there's information being shared about diagnosis, the opinions that are being given about the inner workings of the family, like information that maybe not everybody in the room has a release for, or has been given information, and this is a big pet peeve of mine, and is for many families, that the family doesn't even know this conversation is happening. Like in the medical model, if we're thinking about, we might take this child's gallbladder out, the doctors are going to tell you, we're having a conversation about what the best course of action is. And like, that you're waiting for the doctor to give you a call back about what they think is going on with your kid, right? In mental health, it's like people just get together in a space because something has happened. And oftentimes I see professionals make things a crisis that aren't, right? I had a call like that the other day.
It's like, and then all of a sudden, like, the professionals have worked themselves up to like a level 10 anxiety. And the family's like, this is not new. This is not something that is anxiety producing for us. You should have consulted with us about this thing. Now you've brought that worry to the child, whose anxiety is now risen. And I think most times people don't do that to be harmful, but it's the lack of consideration, and then the lack of accountability, right? So when the family's like, excuse you, like, did you think that you should call me when you guys decided to get into a room and make a bunch of decisions about my kid, and then get worried and involve a bunch of other people, and then call me after everybody's at a level 10?
Call me last.
Like that was not the best way. And then people get defensive instead of like being able to sit in a place of open and listening non-judgmentally, as we teach in youth mental health first aid, right? Listening non-judgmentally to that family. And then people have such a hard time saying, you know what, that was a misstep. Like so I feel like I've watched so many people lose their trusted relationship with families because they don't want to just say, you know what, you're right.
Accountability.
I goofed that one up. I was concerned in the moment. And my first thought wasn't to call you.
Yeah.
And, you know, I'll do better next time. What can we do from here?
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
people want to hear you just say, like, sorry.
Yeah, people want to hear you say sorry. I mean, I think what you're talking about is exactly the challenge, which is that it's a social solutions focused, right? And so we're not just talking about the mental health of the youth or the family. We're also talking about everyone else, right? In the medical model, is pretty black and white. Right, but now we're also dealing with, you brought up the, you know, school's anxiety or the clinician's anxiety, you know, that's also driving the decision making and all of that. And, you know, there's a level of, we can't really control that, right? People are, you know, everyone in the world could probably utilize some level of therapy and support, right? But, you know, those are aspects that we can't shift and change really, but we can help systems and, you know, organizations to kind of move more towards a place where families are being included earlier and earlier and earlier in the process, right? You know, I mean, it's interesting because as you were talking about the medical model, like they wouldn't just like come to a family and be like, this is a decision we made. But I know, like I've gone through nursing school, that there are huddles that happen between just the providers, right? And there are phone calls that are made and research that's done oftentimes before things are presented to the patient and their family, right? So that's a normal aspect of things. But with mental health, it just becomes so much more high stakes because the consequences are so real even before the family gives consent for anything to be happening, right? And that's the challenge, you know. And so as you're talking, you know, I'm thinking about myself as a provider, and I know that when families come to me, they are very much looking at me as the expert. They're coming to me and they're like, they tell me all the things, and then they're like, so tell me what to do. What's the next step, right? And so I want to acknowledge that that's still a dynamic that happens, that families are driving, right? And I think part of that is because we're conditioned to think and behave in that way because of the way the medical model is set up. And so a lot of my work as a provider is to, you know, I see my work as not just giving a recommendation, but thoroughly explaining all the different options and empowering families to make a decision that's best for them, right? Like I can't make that decision for you, right? And I think that's, you know, the shift, you know, in terms of like that relationship. But yeah, it's really challenging. I mean, we see it all the time. We go into schools and groups of guidance counselors are sitting there and they're just going kid by kid. And they're like, you know, well, mom had a substance abuse issue last year, so you know she's neglected, and like,
Let's
you know,
go, blame.
Yeah,
Come
no,
on,
it's
shame.
just like all the things. And you know, those are the facts, right? And so those are things that we definitely need to consider. But the way that in which we're considering those things and the way that we're letting them be factors shouldn't be a sole decision on like the people in that room, right?
Yeah.
So that's the point.
Yeah, I definitely think it's like, this is the importance of that collab, right? Like this is a partnership. And I think even the medical model has shifted a lot towards partnership and collaboration with people, right? Like we definitely
patient-centered care.
Right, patient-centered care, patient first.
Yeah.
Not, you know, we don't live, I think, in a time maybe when our parents were receiving care where like the doctor came in and was like that was like fact, right?
Now it's a conversation.
It's a conversation.
Yeah.
And we as healthcare consumers are smarter, right? We're doing our own research. We're looking into this medication that is being prescribed or this referral that is being given, and this is a great thing, right? That we're working together. It puts the onus on everybody about how we're doing things, right? I think that's a great thing for providers because it can, I think a lot of people feel like there's a heavy weight when you carry the burden of a person's care times X amount of people. And people are human, right? Like we make mistakes, we make errors, we're tired. And so it's hard as a provider, I think, to make the right decision all the time. Nobody is perfect.
Right.
And I think this is the importance of the collaboration with families.
Yeah.
I feel like for me as a family and as a parent and having coached so many families along the way, one of the biggest hurdles is having to work with families on the importance of that collaboration and also working with, for the sake of this example, a school guidance counselor on the importance of that collaboration.
Yeah.
It really takes that joint partnership.
Yeah.
And I think because sometimes these situations are so stressful, we can get into that blaming and shaming on both sides. Families feel like, as an educational system, we're due X, Y, and Z. And guidance counselors feel like you're due X, Y, and Z, and I'm only one person.
Right.
You know, and so can become like this contention.
Yeah.
And this is where I feel like we do a really good job of helping families and professionals to understand the importance of when you work together, the work becomes easier, right? Like we always say in our professional trainings and TA that we do, that many hands make light work, right? And so it's so important for people to establish those relationships prior to the crisis, right? And being fully honest about what you have for time, how you communicate, you know, what's the best way of communication. You know, I always tell people that are working with my family during the day, good luck at getting in touch with me. Let's schedule a time, because if it's not in my calendar, I'm likely not just available to pick up the phone if you just want to have a check-in. Right? Like, that's something that we can schedule. Obviously, if there's an emergency, great. But like, if I'm in the middle of all of the things that I'm constantly doing, and you're calling to be like, so just wanted to check in on how things are going. I'm like, great, until you just called and messed up my whole flow up. It's like, it's not an ideal time, right? And as a parent that's raising a kid with mental health needs, there's always the constant juggling of the prioritization of home, the appointments, making the appointments, getting to the appointments, picking up the appointments, the school meetings, the work meetings, like all of the things that have to happen that all working parents have. But when you have a kid with mental health needs, you take those appointments and double or triple them. So like, when I'm working, I need to be able to commit my time to that. And I think sometimes people who are already at work and it's their job to call families forget that that's the family's working time, right? So these kinds of things of like having this communication in the beginning, like we have screeners that we have sent out to people to say, like, use this when you start your school year. Find out when are the families available to talk. Is it better to text? Is it better to have a phone call? Is it better to email? You know, how are you going to communicate? You know, I am somebody who, and you've heard me say this many times, I always tell families from the beginning, I know like this is going to be a great working relationship, and also there may be a time where we have to have a really hard conversation. And so I want you to know right now that when that time comes, this conversation will be coming from the same place that we are having this conversation right now, where I'm trying to connect with you with care. It's because I want the best for your kid and your family. And even though it might be a difficult conversation, it comes from the same place. And creating that foundation together, I think, really sets a tone where that family is not going to ignore like your phone call anymore. Or like, these are some of the things that I think parents feel like they have sort of like carry this cross, that they're like, this is why we named the episode Notorious Voices, right?
Yeah.
Like parents are notorious for not answering the phone.
Yeah.
They notoriously don't answer the email.
Yeah.
They have like, you know, when you talk about parent advocates, it's people talk about it in a negative way.
Yeah.
And for me, I'm like, that's called good parenting.
Yeah.
Hi.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
If they didn't say anything, then what would the word be?
Right. No, it's true.
Right. It's like, what?
Yeah.
So I think just finding like that place of love and humanity that people together, you know, just like that beautiful example that you gave with RBG, right?
Yeah.
It's like you say the hard things,
Yeah.
and then you go eat some pasta.
Yeah, exactly.
The carbs make it better.
It's fine. It's fine. No, I agree with you. I think, you know, a huge part of it is that communication, that collaboration, you know, and inherent within all that we're saying is the very real facts that mental health challenges are tough for all involved, right? And I think sometimes people don't, you know, give enough credence to that. And, you know, you mentioned youth mental health first aid. One of my favorite modules, it's also the shortest and the last one, is the self-care aspect of it, right? Because somebody who is burnt out isn't going to go the extra mile to help a family, you know, outside of the bounds of what their job description says. As a therapist, you're 1 hour a week, and, you know, the family fends for themselves outside of that, right? And to some extent, you can't blame people for having that stance because the system isn't built to support them to, you know, be that expansive thing, right? And so, you know, that's why we have things like the PEARLs, the Psychological Enhanced Response Liaisons, that, you know, it's a system and a service that we've created to help people to do that work. You know, they do that heavy lifting and help bridge people so those conversations become easier to have, or those points of connection become more natural and not forced, right? Because a lot of what we're talking about is also huge systemic shifts and huge cultural shifts. And that's hard work, right? It's hard emotional work, it's hard logistical work. And when people think about doing that work on top of everything else that they've got going on, it's challenging, right? But having someone who can serve in that role to help those building blocks be put in place so that people can take advantage of the infrastructure rather than having to build it and then also take advantage of it, I think makes a huge difference.
Yeah, I mean, I can't overstate the importance of parental family coaches utilizing their lived experience expertise to be supporting families on their journey, because
families and organizations and infrastructures, right?
Yeah.
They're not just there for families, they're there for all of us, because I think what we've identified is that the whole thing needs that support.
The whole thing, the whole
right?
web.
We need that person to come around with the wand and just like whip it around, you know.
You look like Capture with your
Really?
a little wraparound.
Capture looks like she's getting ready to hit a Dougie. A little bit, just a little bit. She's like, if her legs weren't like that, like I think she was getting ready to. Saying.
She looks like she's about to do a little wraparound.
Oh, I was just gonna say that. Oh, wraparound.
A little
You know, I always have something to say with a wraparound, which is what we need. We need that wraparound support, right? And we can't rely on existing infrastructure to be able to provide that. So.
Right. And so, you know, having somebody who has walked the journey is that level of lived experience, expertise is something that has not been well measured yet, and that's something that we're working on. But you know, you equate that time, like I'll use myself as an example, as I always do. You know, I had to put off my own education for a number of years because I was 100% overburdened. Not overburdened because I love that kid and would give my life for him, but I was overburdened by the amount of things that one person could possibly need to get done in one day, right? As a mom who had a kid that was basically living in crisis, and I had another child who I also had to take care of their needs and make sure that she was safe and she was taken care of and she was loved and all of those things, and trying to financially support my family, right? And so I had to put something down, right? Like, so I had to put down my formal education at that point. And I didn't end up coming back to finish that for 12 years, right? At that point, I was fully established up in this work, right? Like we had already launched Pinnacle. Yeah. Like I had worked with the Department of Mental Health, the Department of Children and Families. I had done direct care work. I had been supporting thousands of families at that point. I went back to get my formal education because that was just something that I wanted to do for myself. Yeah. But the amount of learning and expertise that I encountered and took in over that 12-year period is like, it can't be measured, or we don't have a way yet that we have really fully defined to measure that, right? But what it's like to sit in an emergency room, or to advocate to not sit in board, sit for a number of days in an emergency room waiting for your child to receive psychiatric care if they need it. What that process is like, what it's like to suddenly be thrust into people showing up at your house, different teams of clinical providers, trying to manage all of the people who are calling you, having a different type of school. Yeah. We ended up having a residential. Right. What it means to, at that age, we started at residential at 6. What it means as a mom to try to balance having one child living at home and one child living in a residential educational facility for their mental health needs, and trying to balance like financially supporting everybody and being there for all of my kids. It's like, can somebody quickly make me 8 clones of me? Yeah. Right? Like that, what it takes to do that and do that well it's a skill set. It's a skill set, and it's a skill set that you learn on the job training, right? Like there's no class currently offered anywhere that I'm aware of that's like, here's how to be the most excellent mother for your child that's in residential care and your other child who is typically developing and is at home trying to just live their normal life with that sibling who is actually really experiencing severe mental health needs, and also your boss is calling. Yeah. Like, this is like not a thing, right? And so, and through that, I was meeting other families who had other types of journeys and creating relationships with them and all of those different things. And so 12 years of that, and then coming into the field and providing parent peer support, and then working within governmental systems around family voice, that is not easily like quantifiable, right? But that level of expertise, like what somebody like our Pearls bring into a room of people who are working with a family, and we're sitting around a table with a family there, and potentially that youth and a therapist and some other folks in planning. The way that person can really think through all of those different pathways and support a family's voice, and also support like what it means from those providers, because to do that well, you have to be collaborative. I mean, you can choose to go through it as a family, and I know some families who have done it, right? Like you can strap on your like, what are those helmets with the big like are they like Viking helmets that have like the big horns? Is it Viking? Viking. Yeah, like you can strap on your Viking helmet and like grab 2 axes and like try to just like battle fight your way through, but you're gonna be exhausted. Yes. Like collaboration, that smooth that dance is the way. And oftentimes families get frustrated because it's like, why do I have to do this dance in order to get the services? Right. And I hear that, but it's like, do you want to die on that hill? Of
pick and choose your battles.
Like, why do I have to do this dance? Or do you want to like take the ladder and go directly up the hill and receive the service? You know, like, and that's like the interesting part about the pearls and lived experience expertise is that you don't realize all of these things are out there until you're thrust into it. And that's when these amazing gems, pearls of people are formed, right? Like, they know that those barriers are out there and they've had to walk through these journeys and they couldn't die on that hill in that moment. But they've come back and said, now I can go and pick up these families who are trying to make their way up that ladder or are on that hill. And I'm gonna go and talk to them about why maybe they should decide to get up and get to the ladder instead of dying here. Right? And having like those real conversations with somebody who really understands it. And also some of the providers and different folks that we've talked about who are, you know, tend to be like calling their colleague instead of calling the family, right? Like, let me tell you why it would have been better for me if you had called me versus your colleague, or if you and your colleague had called me together and we talked. So, you know, notorious parent voice. Listen, I could go on and on and on about the importance of having families' voice front and center in both the capacity of the family that is being served and having a lived experience expert there to support what is happening.
To facilitate, absolutely. I mean, it's just, it will make a huge difference. I mean, you know, really what we're talking about is a peer support model, which exists in multiple forms already in the mental health space. You know, we're just kind of forging our way as it relates specifically to children's mental health and families. And it's a complex study because, you know, all of the other peer support models are really focused on that individual who is seeking that peer support. But with the family, it's not just the parent, but it's also all the other adults, and then also anyone else who has a stake in that child or that family doing well, you know, which is wide and varied, you know. So
absolutely. So this was a great conversation. I'm
super important,
and I think we should put some links in our description to places where, well, for our pearls, how you can get in touch with a pearl if you families need one, or somebody listening is interested in learning more about pearls. And also, as families, there's lots of tools out there about how to think through getting your voice together. Like a lot of times it just feels overwhelming where you feel like everybody in the room is an expert. So I think it would be great to maybe link a website where people can download a tool that helps them sort of put their thoughts in order, so that when you are going into that meeting, you know, it's like when you go to the doctor and you're like, I have everything, and the doctor walks in and they're like, how's it going? And you're like, fine. And then you get in the car when you leave and you're like, oh, I totally forgot to tell them about this thing on my foot.
Yes, I think we should definitely do that. There's lots of tools and resources. On the Pearl landing page, we have a whole resource library for families that they can go through. So we'll make sure to get that linked for you all.
And what a great conversation to wrap up Women's International Women's Month. Power to the women.
Power to the voices.
Why didn't I wear my pussy power hat today?
Power to the people. I
haven't worn that thing since like the first Women's March.
You have one of those?
Yeah, girl.
Oh my God. I don't know about it. I don't know. That's a conversation for another podcast.
It's like You know?
It's like a vagina, right?
No, it's not a vagina.
It's a vagina you wear. Oh, it's a cat. It's like a kitty.
It's not a vagina. I don't know why my voice went like all Ursula.
Yeah, you're like, get it right.
It's not a vagina. No,
it's like if Ursula lived on Long Island.
A big Ange.
Yeah. Big Angela. It's not a vagina. What do you think?
Stop it, because so many jokes are coming now that are...
Quit while we're ahead.
Stop it. Jokes are coming. I'm looking at Capture's body over here. It's too much for me. It's too much.
She's just one woman. I think too much. Oh my gosh.
So thank you to our friends here at BCA for this
Thanks for hosting
amazing space.
Sorry.
Nice deep cleansing breath.
Yeah.
And
cleanse. I'm sorry. It's an inside joke.
We
you guys
always have to cleanse and breathe.
We have to cleanse and breathe.
Cleanse and all of that.
And, you know, clear the dust away and the cobwebs and all that good
we
stuff.
do our saging and everything.
So, yes, thank you to the folks at BCA.
Yes. And don't forget,
Don't forget.
Don't forget.
I don't know why.
Subscribe,
rate and review. Yes. Subscribe, rate, and review. And please stick around for the meditation minute. Mm-hmm. Is that what we're calling it? Meditation minute?
Meditation.
And if you don't choose to stick around for the meditation minute, we hope that you take some time out for some self-care.
And know that you can always come back if you don't have a place that you go to for that sort of thing.
Yeah, just always scroll to the end.
Or you could listen to us again.
True that. We love the plays. Okay.
Cheers.
Over and out.